Hello, welcome to Paranormal Files Into the Darkness. I am your host, Sean Wagner, and tonight we'll be talking Alaskan Triangle and Shadow People with Mike Ricksecker. Check it out right now after our intro. Hello, and time to bring on my lovely co-host, Liz Jumper. How you doing, Liz?
Good, thanks. How are you, Sean?
Doing great. Also, this show is a super chat, so please consider giving us a thumbs up and a share on Facebook, or thumbs up, subscribe, and share on YouTube. Also, consider hitting the bell so you can be notified of all future broadcasts. Thank you. Also, if you have any questions along the way, please put them in all capital letters. All right. Brenda, can you please scroll across future guests on the bottom right now, if you could, please? And also now for the real introduction tonight. He is the author of the best-selling book, A Walk in the Shadows, a complete guide to shadow people, 8 historic paranormal books, and the esoteric tome, Alaska's Mysterious Triangle. They can all be purchased at Amazon. He's appeared on multiple television shows and programs as a paranormal historian, including Travel Channel's The Alaskan Triangle, Discovery Plus's Fright Club, Animal Planet's The Haunted, Bio Channel's My Ghost Story, Ren TV's From Russia, Mysteries of Mankind. He also produces his own internet supernatural-based shows on the Haunted Road Media YouTube channel, and is the producer and director of the docuseries The Shadow Dimension, which is available on several streaming platforms. And he has a show, or is a class, more or less, I'm sorry, Connecting the Universe, interactive live stream class. He also operates the Haunted Road Media, paranormal and supernatural video production and book publishing company, representing a number of authors, winning the award for excellent media in the paranormal field at the 2019 Shock Fest Film Festival. Also does historic paranormal articles, been published in the Baltimore Sun, Paranormal Underground magazine, and he previously wrote an Oklahoma City paranormal column for theexaminer.com. His work have been featured in the Oklahoman, the Frederick News Post, Marshall University's The Parthenon, Louisiana State University's Civil War Book Review. He now hosts many of these articles with informational videos and learning courses on the Connected Universe Portal website, and that is connecteduniverseportal.com. And his other site is MikeRicksecker.com. He's a native of Cleveland, Ohio, also a U.S. Air Force veteran and avid baseball fan. Ladies and gentlemen, our guest is the great Mike Ricksecker. And first of all, Mike, thank you for serving.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. But thanks for having me, Sean and Liz. Really appreciate being on tonight.
We're certainly glad to have you. First of all, can you tell us about your time serving in Alaska?
Yeah, it was first 3 years of my enlistment. It was kind of the classic, train you in the heat of Texas and Mississippi, and then first place, you're going to freeze your butt off in Alaska. So that was the first 3 years of. I was in for 6 and ended up getting redeployed to Fort Meade, Maryland, NSA. For the next 3. But it was, interesting because I was a young guy. I was 18 years old, homesick, far from home. And it was very cold. And, my first introduction to Alaska as I'm getting off the airplane was November 1st, 1992. There's already a bunch of snow on the ground. And mixed in with the snow is actually some ash from a recent volcano eruption. So it was just a whole different world up there.
Oh, it definitely sounds like it would have been. And Alaska is kind of its own different world. definitely, yes. And
yeah, it really is. It's really unlike any other place. It's a difficult place to live. You know, I spent 3 years there, and so those people that are, you know, native to Alaska or decide, hey, this is going to be the place that I go to and, you know, live for the next 20, 30, rest of their life, whatever. My hat off to them, because it's a difficult road those months during the winter, because it gets extremely cold, gets extremely dark. Now the summer's the opposite, where, you know, it's actually really pleasant outside. It only gets to about dusk, you know, it doesn't really get all that dark. So the summers are very, very beautiful. And so I always tell people, you know, go visit Alaska, check it out during the summer. You know, there's such beauty and majesty up there. Everything's bigger in Alaska, but the winters are pretty hard.
Oh, it certainly makes sense. Also, I forgot to do something. I forgot to do the toast that we always do at the beginning of the show. So for everybody that works hard during the week, thank you. Cheers.
Cheers.
All right. How
So,
were
Mike,
your
how
parents?
were your?
Go ahead.
Oops. Go ahead. I was
go
going to
ahead.
ask Sean. How were your parents about the whole paranormal thing with you growing up? Did they encourage it? Did they not discuss it?
So, I mean, my dad never believed in it, or at least he always said that he never believed in it. Although it's funny because, you know, he'll talk about things that have happened to him, and I'm like, Dad, that's a ghost story. He's like, nah. I'm like, what? So he still kind of denies it. You know, my mom has always believed in paranormal phenomena, but when I was a child and things happened, like when I was very young and had some of my first significant experiences, like my first significant paranormal experience was a shadow person incident that actually got physical with me. And, you know, I'm only 8 years old at the time, and went running, you know, screaming to my parents' bedroom. This is the middle of the night. And they're just, you know, trying to console me, calm me down, trying to tell me I just had a bad dream, even though I knew I'd been awake for this whole thing. So, you know, they're trying to be nice parents. When I was teenager, 13 years old, not long after I turned 13, we had moved from that house in Massachusetts to a house in Ohio. And I, again, kept seeing shadow phenomena, but different than that one experience I had back in Massachusetts. This one didn't get physical with me. It was very translucent, very fast, and it would just kind of, you know, peek its head in the doorway of my bedroom. And as soon as I would look at it, you know, I'm like unpacking boxes, putting things away, and, you know, I'd turn and look at it and it'd go running off down the hall. And that had happened many times. So I ended up asking my mom about it, you know, make sure I'm not going crazy. And she admitted that she had seen this thing too, which was great, because, you know, she was affirming that, okay, I'm not crazy. Mom's seeing this thing too. But she also said it in a really disarming manner, which, you know, it let me know that this wasn't something I had to worry about. So it's like, you know, Mom's seen it. She's okay with it. Doesn't seem to be bad, at least according to her. So I got playful with this thing, and I called him Tom, like peeping Tom, because he'd always be peeping in my room. And I say, hi, Tom, and off he'd go. And, you know, that activity lasted for about 3 or 4 months before it just kind of disappeared. So, so I think my mom handled all that pretty well. And then my sister was just kind of nonplussed about the whole thing. So, so they each handled it a little bit differently.
Any idea what it might have been?
I mean, it's the shadow phenomenon that I talk about in my book, A Walk in the Shadows. So that particular one would have been more of the wisp type of a shadow. It's like you could tell a form there, but still very translucent, very fast. So it was more of kind of the wisp type of a shadow, rather than, you know, full blown humanoid figure shadow person that the first experience was.
Do people mostly get I would imagine, because they need energy, they get the lower one is much more common than the full blown one. Is it a good assumption or not?
I mean, you have a lot of different varieties, so it's hard to say which is more common than the other, because everybody has a really different experience. I mean, we try as humans to try to, categorize and compartmentalize, what these different things are, which is why the first section of my book, types of shadow people, is like, okay, we got humanoid figures, we got hooded figures, we've got hat wearing entities, we've got myths, we've got wisps, we've got crawlers, all these different things. So we're trying to make sense of it. But most of these are reported quite often and in a variety of different scenarios. So trying to pinpoint, okay, like when do they manifest? Well, they manifest every time of day, sure. A lot of people report, I woke up in the middle of the night, saw this thing in my room. Okay. But a lot of people report seeing them run down the hall, or they might, like I, saw one standing in the doorway, could be crossing a room. They might see it in the woods. Yeah, there are a large variety of different situations and different forms that they take.
Any idea of what their their purpose is?
Again, depends on the shadow. So some of them are just human spirits that can't fully manifest as an apparition. So those would just be, your grandmother or your Aunt Jane or what have you. So nothing evil, nasty, nefarious. You do have ones that sure, are a bit more malicious, and those cases are certainly scary. But you have other ones that they're extraterrestrials. Some of these are actually ET phenomena. Some of them are astral projections. Some are time slips. Others are, interdimensional beings whose agendas we're not really sure about, but they're kind of watching, observing, that sort of thing. So it just kind of really depends on the shadow. So what I end up telling people is like, well, if it's a recurring phenomenon, see if you can try to interact with this thing. See if you can, get some EVPs, maybe get a message. When they communicate, usually it's through some sort of thought transference or telepathy. So, see if you can try to get a response and ask what it wants, what it wants to do. That first shadow experience that I had when I was a child, when it physically interacted with me, what it did is it came up to my bed. I'm trying to scream. My mouth opens up. Nothing's coming out. It grabbed me by the wrists, crossed my arms across my body, and then it ran off down the hall. So, of course, for many years, I thought that was a terrible experience. I was 8 years old, frightened kid. Over the years, as I talked to people about this incident, and I started coming on shows like this to talk about shadow experiences, because I was, started giving presentations on this. I was wanting to know more about what this phenomenon was. So I was doing research. And of course, as I continue to do research, and I was, of course, working as a paranormal investigator in the field, I had all these different stories and this different knowledge I'd gained. So, other people kept sharing with me their stories. So, over time, on a couple of different shows that were like this, a couple of people had suggested, well, maybe it thought that you were dead, and it was putting you into a burial pose, like, crook and flail sort of thing, like out of Egypt. And it's like, oh, that's a different perspective on it. That's kind of interesting. And if that's the case, then rather than trying to do something nefarious to me, it would actually be honoring me. Okay, that's an interesting idea. I can run with that for a little while. But last year, it was actually around this time last year, I had a hypnotic regression to see, well, one, check into some past lives and see if I can glean any information from that. But also I wanted to know more about this experience that I'd had when I was 8 years old. And as I was in this hypnosis session, it was really interesting because I ended up from the perspective of the shadow, not as myself, but as the shadow. And I was actually looking down at my 8-year-old self, this little frightened boy, from the shadow's perspective. And I actually got to, feel and sense what was going on with this entity. And it actually felt bad that it had scared me. It didn't realize at first that I could see it until I suddenly reacted. And then it felt bad that that it had scared me. So the whole going over to my bed and crossing my arms, what it was trying to do was give me like a self hug. And another thing that I saw from this perspective was that it actually patted me on the wrist, like it'll be okay, sort of thing. and then it ran off down the hall so it could just get out of there and stop scaring me. So it was a really, really different perspective that I got from that. So this thing was not there to do me any harm. So the question then is, okay, what was it there for? Which is one of the questions that was asked by the hypnotist, who was, or a hypnotherapist, I guess is what they call themselves. Her name's Ariana Corsino. She trained under Dolores Cannon. And so the response to, what is it, you were doing there? What did you want? And the response was that they were there to study humanity, that they were curious about who we were, what our habits are, just, watching and observing and researching, kind of like we would do if we went to some other planet or dimension, which was, the follow-up question, where are you from? And it responded with, I'm from another space. So then her follow-up, Ariana's follow-up was, do you mean another dimension? And the response was, well, you might call it another dimension, but really it's another space. So kind of cryptic, because, okay, we might, relate that to being a dimension, but to them, it's somehow a bit different. And they called it a space. So take from it what you will, but a very, very interesting perspective that I don't think a lot of people consider, because they always, when we talk about shadow entities, a lot of people go down, and it's like, right. Yeah, but that's the case for some of these, but certainly not all.
Yeah, it's surprising to me how you even indicated in other places, I believe it, and right here as well, that some might actually be able to help you. I would have never thought of what all they could be. If they'd actually some could actually be able to help us.
Yeah, I've collected some stories in which they have actually helped people. One just, very simple story. A friend of mine, Kat Gash, she was in Ireland at an abandoned abbey, and she's up in the tower area. And her sister, who was down below, had seen this dark hooded figure kind of walking about on the floor there. And, Kat later, and she revealed this to her later on, and Kat was like, well, there was nobody else up there with me. It was just me. Nobody else was there. But when Kat was coming back down the stairs, she slipped and fell and was, about to go crashing down the stairs, maybe break a leg or something. You never know. But somebody reached out and grabbed her and pulled her back so that she didn't fall down the stairs. And it was this dark hooded figure. So you're thinking, okay, it's an abandoned abbey. Hooded figure is probably a monk from, back in the day. It could only manifest as a shadow rather than as a full apparition. That happens. Another interesting story that, and I include these in my book, A Walk in the Shadows, so you get all the details there. But this one woman, her son, when he was small, he was like 2-3 years old, something like that, and he was very ill. And she kept seeing this shadowy form, again, a hooded figure, walking into his room. She would see it, kind of pass down by the hall and into his room. And so she's thinking, this is kind of like harbinger of death sort of thing. It's coming to get him. And so they kept, going, back to the hospital, back to the doctor. They're doing all these different tests. And they thought they had a diagnosis, but, even with that particular diagnosis, they couldn't really help him. So this one particular time, they're back at the doctor's office, and they'd run all the same tests. They didn't have a different evaluation yet. And all of a sudden, the doctor turned his head as if somebody was whispering into his ear. And then he turned back around and said, you know what? Let's run these other tests over here. And they ran those other tests, and they discovered, oh, he didn't have this illness. He has a different illness, something that was actually treatable. And they were able to, successfully, get the boy back up to full health, which was wonderful. Never saw the shadow person again. And she attributes what happened there in the doctor's office, even though they couldn't see it. She swears that shadow entity was there in the doctor's office and was the one whispering into the doctor's ear the test to run. So wow. Kind of an interesting perspective. Yeah.
Very interesting. Very good. Any any experiences you had while you were in Alaska as far as the shadow people go?
Actually, yeah. So I include this in Alaska's Mysterious Triangle. So the facility that I ended up stationed in. So the first year that I was in Alaska, I was waiting for my security clearance. It was like 10 months or something like that before it finally came in. And the facility that I ended up after the security clearance came in, it was actually the basement of the Alaska Command Building. So when I talked about it being dark in Alaska, when I was in that facility, if I did not go out for lunch during the day, because it's in the basement, no windows, if I didn't go out for lunch that day, I didn't see the sun that day. Mm-hmm. So I tried to make sure to get out for lunch so I could see the sun. But within that facility, we have, there's the big communications room with all the servers. There's another, what we called the rack room, because it had like all the communications racks and patch panels and things like that. It also had the safe where we kept the crypto devices. And then we had the office area. And it was primarily in the back office area that we would see the shadows moving about. And sometimes we would see one maybe dart into the rack room, or on the other side of the rack room, the computer center kind of wrapped around a little bit. And there was a little room back there with these old printers. I never saw the lights turned on back there, but every once in a while you'd see like one of these shadows dart into that room back there. And so we couldn't really talk about it too much. It was kind of in whispers and in hushed tones, because if you start talking about, hey, I'm seeing things or hearing things or whatever, you're going to find yourself down at mental health. And if they deem that you're starting to get kind of crazy or whatever, then boom, you're going to get your security clearance pulled, and you're going to be working at the orderly room, or worse, maybe be doing some KP duty or whatever. So you didn't want that. So it was kind of in hushed tones. We talked about it, and there was a running story at the time that the building had once been a hospital, and the facility that we were at had been the morgue and the rack room where we kept all of our communications racks and panels and everything. That's where they actually stored the coolers. So it made sense. Okay, fine. So we're seeing the spirits of the people that were brought to the morgue. Except that when I did research for my book, Alaska's Mysterious Triangle, and I got into the history of that building, it was never a hospital. It was built exactly what is still being used for, and that was command. So that made me start wondering, okay, then what in the world did we actually see down there? If these aren't spirits from, deceased people from the morgue, what are we witnessing? And I think what we were witnessing was, some sort of time slip, that there was a bleed over from another era in time. And, we're just simply seeing personnel either from the past or even from the future moving about. And that's something that I've found here over the past couple of years, really interesting and fascinating as I collect more stories and talk to more people. Last night for my class on the Connected Universe portal, we covered doppelgangers, and not from the sense of the quote unquote evil twin sort of thing. And we started off with some of those legends and moved more into, okay, that's legend and folklore and myth. What is a real doppelganger? What are some of these sightings that people are actually having? And one story that was conveyed to me last year was from this young man. When he was very little, he had walked into his kitchen, and there, standing by the table, was this tall, dark, hooded figure. Scared him to death. He ran out of the kitchen. So, okay, hooded shadow figure, right? Well, years later, he's in the kitchen, and he's at the kitchen table making a sandwich. He's wearing a hoodie. And suddenly, in the doorway, he sees walking in this short shadow person about the size of a child that all of a sudden runs off as if it was scared. And he realized in that moment, oh my gosh, I'm the shadow person. When I was a small child, I actually saw myself years later down the road, and now I just saw my past self as a child. But it could only, the energy in that moment could only resonate enough to come off as a shadow. So you didn't see, full blown forms, it was only enough as a, you know, to come off as a shadow, but that's a time slip.
Mhm.
So, and I think that's what's happening more in some of these cases that we're deeming, you know, ghosts or shadows or what have you. I think a lot more of these are actually time slips rather than some of this other phenomenon.
Any idea, could you actually possibly communicate with yourself or the time slip person if it's different than you?
You can. So, Andrea Perrin from, you know, she's well known from the Conjuring, very, very good friend of mine. And she tells a story about her mother. Well, Andrea was there too. She was cooking some food for her mom, but while her mother was waiting in the parlor of what we call the Conjuring house, all of a sudden in the dining room, this like whole scene morphed into existence. So there was a woman cooking over the fire, you know, to a fireplace that hadn't been used in like hundreds of years. Some children were running about, and sitting at the table were these two men with these pewter tankards. And they turned and looked at Carolyn, and the other said to the one, "Well, would you look at that?" As if Carolyn was the ghost. So they definitely had some interaction there, and some other stories that, you know, I've heard over the years of, you know, a woman walking in, seeing her daughter there, running off, you know, and the daughter saying, "Well, hi, mom, how, you know, what's going on?" Because it was like middle of the night sort of thing. And the mother went running off, and the daughter went chasing after her, like, "What the heck's wrong with mom?" Got to the bedroom, and her mother was actually sleeping there in bed. So she had actually seen some sort of doppelganger of her mother, had a bit of an interaction there that freaked out the mom, but it wasn't her mom of the present time. Not really sure if it was, you know, past or future, but I'm guessing what happened in that moment is the mother saw her and was like, you know, either this is my daughter older or younger than she should be, you know, and she got scared and took off. So again, more of a time slip.
Any chance maybe some could be time travelers?
They can be. If somebody, you know, we don't know how technology is going to work in the future. So would it be some sort of tech that makes time travel happen? And that just says that.
We might. Do we lose Mike temporarily? All right. See if Mike comes back here in a moment or two. Hello, everyone. Again, our guest tonight is Mike Ricksecker. He's been on a number of TV shows talking about the Alaskan Triangle, as well as shadow people. That's what we were talking about just a little bit ago. He has a couple websites too, MikeRicksecker.com, and the other one is ConnectedUniversePortal.com. You have to reach out to him. Hopefully, we'll have him back in just a moment. He was also a veteran as well. Always always great. And I don't have too much else to say to keep things going too long if he doesn't come back terribly soon.
Boy, when he was talking about that story, though, with the shadow person, you know, crossing his arms, you know, it reminded me of that incident that I had when I was a little girl, where I was sick. I knew I was sick, but I felt something touch my back, and I turned, and it was just I watched it float down the hallway, and that was it. And I felt better. Like just hours later, I felt like I was not sick, you know. It kind of reminds me of that. And when he said about the woman, you know, walking down the hallway, I had an incident like that in the same house. It was in Philadelphia and at the shipyard, actually. And I thought this person was my mother walking in the hallway, and my mom was in her own room. So I don't know if that was actually a shadow person or if if it was some kind of ghost. I always assumed it was just a ghost, but you know, it looked just like my mom. I swore it was my mom.
Yeah, I also figured that most things we investigate are ghosts. Never thought of any of the other possibilities.
Right.
In doing EV, and that's why I thought, can you communicate with them? Because then that would specify a ghost, possibly.
Right.
Well, possibly either way, depending upon the answer.
Maybe, but I mean, if this is another, another being too, you could communicate as well, right?
I would think so, definitely. Welcome back, Mike.
Thanks. Sorry about that. My computer suddenly blue screened on me.
Oh,
just out of nowhere.
well, I'm glad you're back.
Stuff happens. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, like I said, welcome back. And I think did you get through the story completely, close to it, or not?
You're asking me about time travelers. Could they possibly be time travelers?
Yes.
So certainly, like from the perspective of time slip that we were talking about, but somebody like intentionally trying to move through time, I believe could be possible. Now we don't know, what technology may look like in the future. Do we finally build the flux capacitor that makes time travel possible? Possibly. I think that there are certainly time travel in the future that people have figured it out. But I actually think that real time travel, instead of a machine that we're going to build, will have more to do with the consciousness. That'll be a projection of your consciousness from the point in time that you're at to whatever point in time you're trying to go to, basically willing yourself into that moment. And so in that sense, the question would then become, okay, if I project my consciousness into a certain point in time, what would it actually look like? And I do believe like things like astral projections can sometimes come off as a shadow, because you're sending your energy to a location. So when that energy possibly manifests at that place, what does it turn into? Is it and this is the example that I'll use, is like, take a grandmother who knows how to astral project, but she lives far away from her family, and at times she wants to go visit, but can't because it's, I don't know, 500,000 miles away. It's expensive. But she knows how to astral project. So maybe at night, she sends her consciousness in to go look at her daughter or her granddaughter. Well, let's say she does that late at night when they're sleeping, and suddenly, they wake up and they're looking at this, possibly figure standing there, because, her energy may actually be manifesting in the room there. And it could look like a shadow. Some people talk about seeing a shimmer type of a person. That could be what it actually is. So the same thing would apply for a time traveler if they're traveling, with their consciousness.
Can I ask, any idea how somebody would go about doing that?
Meditation for one. Have you ever seen the movie Somewhere in Time with Christopher Reeve and Jane Seymour?
I'm bad on movies. How about you,
No?
Liz?
Okay.
I think that it's a pretty old movie, isn't it?
It's an old movie. Yeah, it came out in 1980.
Yeah.
but it's fascinating. I mean, most of it's a love story, but what he does is he does will his consciousness back to 1912, and he does this by purely believing it. He like sets up the room, his clothing, all this to look like back at that time frame, so that his entire surroundings are reminding him it's 1912. It's 1912. He uses a cassette tape to do some subliminal messages to tell him, you're in the Grand Hotel. It's 1912. These different people are there. This stuff is going on at that time, so that it's in his head. I'm in 1912, and he eventually does send himself back to that time. So the mechanics of that might be a little clunky, but I think it's certainly possible to be able to do that.
Okay, Liz, you have a question for him?
I do. Well, it's do you or have you witnessed shadow people then yourself? You witnessed shadow people yourself?
Oh, wait,
Yeah,
you did. I'm sorry.
I kind of told you about a few experiences there, but I've seen a lot of shadow entities over the years. So I think what ends up happening.
Oh, go ahead. What's the
No,
most
what's your follow-up?
unusual thing that you've witnessed with the shadow people?
So most unusual, which actually helped with my research, was at Mineral Springs Hotel, Alton, Illinois. We'd run an event there, Haunted Road Media Paracon. We did a couple of those over the years until COVID kind of killed the third, and we haven't done one since. But we were running the paranormal investigation that comes at the end of the night, just kind of really winding down. Just a handful of us left, and we were in the upstairs abandoned part of the hotel. We're doing some EVP sessions in what's known as Pearl's room. So it's a corner suite. There's a confirmed suicide in there by a woman named Pearl, and she's been she's been witnessed there many times. A lot of EVPs, people have actually seen her there. And so we're doing some EVP work there. But we start hearing some noises come from down the hall. So I go out and take a look. And from down the hall, I see this black smoke start to billow up and come forward. And this is, one of the manifestations of a shadow is what we call the mist, but it can take like a vaporous cloud-like form or smoke-type form. And it's coming closer and closer. And all the while it's coming closer, it starts doing something really interesting. It starts creeping up the wall on the right-hand side of the hall, and you creep back down and creep back up, all the while coming closer and closer. And finally, it ends up morphing into the apparition of a little girl. And by this time, everybody is out in the hallway. There's 5 of us that witnessed this little girl apparition. We're trying to coax her closer, closer. And she ends up stopping right at this doorway where in that room, many people over the years had said that they had witnessed a little girl spirit who's up there. So there's, things like, teddy bears and that sort of stuff in that room. She had stopped right by that doorway. She wouldn't move any closer from there. So it was like, okay, this is great. This is actually, for one, it's confirming the story of the little girl being up there. It also confirmed for me that, yes, some of these shadows that we witness are actually human spirits. I mean, she came out of rolling black smoke. And, here's this little girl. And what's interesting is we all saw the little girl a little bit differently. So I saw her fully formed from her head all the way down to about her knees, and then she kind of dissipated away. Others saw her fully formed from her feet on up into, and then her head started to fade out. And so it kind of adheres to the idea that, we all resonate at a little bit of a different frequency. The human body has a certain frequency range in which it will resonate, but each person is a little bit different. And these spirits also have their own, frequency and resonance and vibration, that they're giving off. So this is why, sometimes, like in that instance, we're all seeing this a little bit differently, but in paranormal investigations, you'll have people that, hey, did you see that? And the other person's like, no. And like, how in the world could you miss it? It was plain as day. Right. Because we're all, we all have a little bit of a different resonance about ourselves. And so I think with, because you'll have some people see more shadows and apparitions, and other people see more apparitions and shadows. Well, I'm the former. I see more shadows than apparitions. I think what's happened is over time, my personal resonance has become in tune to the frequency of these shadow entities. So when there's one in the room, it's like, okay, something's here. Hey, there it is, because my body's in tune to it. I mean, I will see apparitions from time to time, but my body is not as in tune to it. So I don't see as many of them as I do the shadows.
Can you, I know you said somewhere too, we can actually pick up, we can tell something's nearby possibly if we know how to do it, right? Like if we're being watched by a shadow person, correct?
Well, yeah, we all have, a bit of a sixth sense. Some, have more of that than others. People, it's almost kind of like a muscle. If you start to exercise it, you can develop that more. And some people are more naturally gifted. It's kind of, you just take a sport. Like, I was a pretty good baseball player, but I never made the major leagues. Those guys are very naturally gifted, but I was able to, train myself up enough where I could play pretty well. And, I lettered in high school and played after high school, and all that. So it's kind of that sort of thing. We each have a little bit of a different ability, but for me, when it comes to that sort of thing, so I can walk into a room and be like, okay, yeah, something's here. But I couldn't tell you necessarily exactly why. I might be able to pick up on a male or female energy or, that sort of thing. But some people will be like, oh no, it's, her name is this, and she, lived here at this time, and all that stuff. Right. Again, it comes down to energy resonance and vibration. And when, so we each have a toroidal field of energy that surrounds us. So when we pass into these things and their energy crosses into ours, we feel that. It's kind of like, you could be on the other side of a room, your back's to the door, and all of a sudden somebody walks through the door. And even though you didn't hear them, you're like, somebody just walked in the room. You turn around, boom, and somebody's sitting there.
Can you tell us about the Alaskan Triangle? I know that's something else that you've talked about before.
Yeah, I have a whole book on that. yeah, I have a whole book on that, Alaska's Mysterious Triangle, and I was on the television show, the Alaska Triangle, several of those episodes. And it's, people say, well, is that like the Bermuda Triangle? Yeah. Some people refer to it as Alaska's Bermuda Triangle, which is kind of funny because Bermuda's
Right.
a totally, different part of the world. But there are a lot of these triangle areas all over the place. So it's not just Bermuda. The Alaska Triangle is a rather big one. And, you see the graphic there, Juneau to Anchorage to Reykjavik. But you have the Dragon Triangle in Japan. You have the Bridgewater Triangle in Massachusetts. There's the Lake Michigan Triangle. So you have all these different triangle areas with similar activity to varying degrees. So missing people, missing airplanes, ships. You have like heightened UFO activity, heightened paranormal activity. More cryptid sightings. This sort of thing that is very prevalent in these triangle areas, and it has to do with the magnetic activity in the area. So it's when we talk about triangle areas or vortices and that sort of thing, it's that energy that's welling up from the Earth's magnetic core, and it's passing through different minerals and metals and crystals and things like that, through the Earth's through the Earth's crust. And when it interacts with those different things, you get these different magnetic signatures. So like in Alaska, the U.S. Department of the Interior did some studies there, did some surveys back in the 1960s of about 100,000 square miles of Alaska. So not the whole state, but a good chunk of it. And they found what they called 5 different magnetic characters. And some of these characters they described as negative anomalies. So things that would very drastically interact with the surrounding area. And so that's why we're getting like portal spawning off, why we're getting the disappearances, why all of a sudden an airplane, their compasses will suddenly go crazy and things like that.
That's cool. And obviously negative anomalies are not very common in other places throughout the world then, correct?
Well, I mean, you have some places that are just, nothing's ever completely dead, but you have some locations that just don't have nearly as much magnetic activity as others. Or, there's that, what's the name of it? That place in Mexico where you can go and just everything is dead there because it's such high magnetic activity. Like cell phones won't work, radios won't work, nothing. It's just a complete dead zone.
Something Teple? Is that it? Something Teple?
Something like that. Yeah, I forget the exact name of it.
All right. I was going to ask too, what do you, is there anything that can cause the magnetic anomalies that occur in the Alaskan and Bermuda triangles?
Well, that's, like I was saying, that's the, as the magnetic activity or the magnetism is coming through the ground there, it hits those different metals and minerals. That's where you get those different electromagnetic signatures. With Alaska, you have some other factors in play as well. So a lot of seismic activity. They get a lot of earthquakes up there. Second largest earthquake ever recorded in the world, largest ever for the United States, was up in Alaska. It was in 1964. It's a 9.2 quake. You have a lot of volcanic activity there as well. So you've got like this cocktail of different energies that are mixing together up there, or even the solar flares that we get. The aurora borealis that appears in Alaska is for a reason. The magnetic shield up there is thinner than other areas of the world, and so when the solar flares slam into our magnetic shield up there, and of course at the South Pole as well, there's more of that energy that's getting through. So when you have like a mass coronal ejection that can devastate power grids down here, well, it affects Alaska even more so. So you add that to the mix too, and it's just this it's just this mess of energy up there that can cause all these different things to happen.
That's fascinating. Okay, why don't we go into Brendan? This might apply to you. I'm going to try to share the Shadow Dimension docuseries he has, the trailer for that. Just one moment here. All right, here it comes.
There's a kind of a hallway connecting the bedrooms. Coming down that hall was something. I want to say black, but it was more like the absence of vision. Something dark. My first thought was there's a fire in the house, and I'm going to smell smoke. It was somewhat rolling towards me, but formless, just darkness. As somebody had erased reality.
Thank you. I have to sit down for a minute.
You okay?
Can you take the camera for me?
Yes, certainly. What's the matter, Mike?
Something over here, I don't know.
I just think it's getting darker in here.
I woke up in the middle of the night one night, and there was this tall, dark figure standing in the corner of my room.
What is this? Who are they? I tend to think they're from another dimensional space.
I call it a gravitational distortion.
Nope, look at that. Whoa. Pointing right at the hole.
It's all right over here.
That's right. This is where the energy is.
I think this is kind of an opening to another reality.
So you can see all these connections that are interwoven.
I have frequently described as a portal cleverly disguised as a farmhouse.
That's the bedroom in which I had the experience when I was about 8 years old.
Amare ea Glapsorga.
It had red, glowing eyes.
And that smoke came forth, something in my face walking in here.
I think something's happening here.
All right, very nice. Can you tell us about it a little bit, if you could, please?
Thank you. Yeah, Shadow Dimension. Well, you can watch it for free on Tubi TV right now. So please go ahead and check it out. 6 episodes. So the idea was to go to these locations that have reported this type of shadow phenomenon and, see what we can discover. Is there something in common with these locations that causes these different things to manifest, like portal activity, which is, something, the 2 locations we were actually able to get to, because this was 2020, in the middle of COVID. And so it kind of hindered, where we could go. But we got to, the Conjuring House there in Rhode Island, and we got to Mineral Springs out in Alton, Illinois. And interesting portal activity reported at both, there at Mineral Springs. I mean, you're right down the street really from Cahokia Mounds, which are, they're the largest. They consider it a pyramid. It's a mound structure, but largest pyramid north of Mesoamerica, right along the Mississippi River. They have the limestone bluffs right there. So and then the Mineral Spring is right there, still open in the bottom of the hotel as well. And in the Conjuring House, you have the well room, which it's an open well. There's still water in it. You have these limestone walls capped with granite blocks, which is like a perfect little power plant to help, churn this activity. So that was kind of the idea of, is there some sort of factor going on with the land or the construction of the area that's spawning off these different portals? That's allowing these different shadow entities to move in, from some other dimension. And so, we explored these 2 locations. We did, a lot of historic research, brought in a lot of great special guests like, Johnny Enoch, Andrea Perrin, Mark Anthony, Carl Johnson was on the scene a lot. It was, a fantastic experience to go to these locations and, purposefully seek out this different phenomena. I'm in the middle of season 2, editing that, and hopefully, fingers crossed, that'll be out by the end of the year, at the latest early next year.
Sounds awesome. And again, you said people can watch that on Tubi for free as well, correct?
Yep. Tubi TV. It's a free streaming service. So, 6 episodes. Go check it out. The Shadow Dimension.
Right. Awesome. Okay, we're going to try something as well I haven't done before. Again,
okay.
We're going to try a screen share. I'm going to try to bring up your 2 websites. Not sure how it's going to go, so we're going to try. All right. I need to get over here. There we go. Are you guys able to see this?
I can see it.
You can see it? All right. Awesome.
Yep.
You want to go ahead and talk a little bit about your classes?
Yeah, absolutely. ConnectedUniversePortal.com. So this is an online learning platform. There's a couple of just straight courses that you can purchase if you want. One is on shadow entities. The other is on ancient Egypt, which is a really great deal because you get over like 12 hours of footage from ancient Egypt, and it's like only $20. But the really great value is in the membership site. 30-day free trial, and it's only like $10 a month. But you get access to a weekly interactive class where we take one of these esoteric subjects and we run with it. The class is asking questions, and it's a great conversation that we're having about these different topics. We have monthly Q&A videos. We've got a ton of articles back there. All the Egypt stuff that I was just talking about is back there as well. So you don't even have to buy the Egypt course. If you're a member, you already have it. There's a lot of research from the American Southwest that's in there. The Ireland research that's coming up this summer is going to go in there. You get like behind the scenes, the sneak peek videos of all the different projects that I'm working on. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes there with Connected Universe Portal.
All right, awesome. And we'll stop over at MikeRicksecker.com as well, right here. Can you see that as well?
Yep.
All right, cool.
This is my personal website. So you get all my general information about my books, television shows that I've been on, the podcasts that I run. The blog that I used to have out on there is now on the Connected Universe Portal site. So if you were to click on the blog, it would actually take you to Connected Universe Portal because that's where it is now. But my event schedule is out there. So if people want to meet me and get a signed book and all that sort of stuff, you can find out where I'm going to be speaking at. So and then we have tours out there. If you go to Travel the World there, we have some different tours coming up. So yeah, if you just scroll down there. So Ireland tour is happening here in a couple of weeks. Technically, you could still jump on that, but because we do have a couple of tickets still available, but that would be really pressing it here since we're leaving. I'm leaving June 29th. The tours from the 1st to the 9th. So the one to jump on that's available right now, Stargates of Ancient Egypt. That is next February. So I was in Egypt last year. That Shadow Dimension Season 2 is going to feature a lot of things from Egypt, and that's why I have so much Egypt material on the Connected Universe Portal site. But we're going back next February. And then we are in the midst of planning an Alaska Triangle cruise, but we don't have specifics on it yet, so you got to be on the lookout for that. So lots going on.
All of them sound very nice. All right, let me come back here now. We'll stop sharing, and I should come back.
Here we are.
Maybe not.
We see
you. Here we go. I didn't think I ever left, but I wasn't able to see the screen. What was going on, though? All right. What do you think of today's TV shows?
I know a lot of people. A lot of people will. How do I kind of want?
It's
people kind of trash talk them, and I understand why, because there's a lot of sensationalism on the shows, and that's the networks for you. Sensationalism sells, and back in the day when you just had like Scariest Places on Earth or GhostHunters when they came out in the first couple seasons of those, you had a lot of the, whether it was debunking or just kind of like some storytelling, and the networks were like, no, now every place has to be haunted. No, now every place has to have a demon. Just amped it up more and more. So I understand that, and that's why so many people are turned off from the shows. But a couple of things the shows have done. For one, it gets you asking questions. Like, okay, this may be sensationalized, but is there something really going on at this location, or is there something really going on with that type of phenomenon? And a lot of people will start doing their own research into that type of activity. It's also helped people realize that they're not alone in all of this. It's a television show, there's sensationalism, all that, but they're looking at it because they interview people that were at those locations, or maybe it's a family that had some sort of experience or what have you, and somebody watching that show will be like, hey, I've had that same experience too. I can relate. I'm not alone. I'm not crazy. And so that sort of thing has really helped. And so more and more people are coming forward to tell their stories. Because, back in the day, if you talked about hearing voices or seeing apparitions or, something like that, you'd be locked up into a straitjacket and tossed away somewhere. But, now it's a lot more acceptable. And people will ask me the question, well, does it seem like there's more activity going on these days? And it's like, well, we've always had activity. These things have always been going on, but people are feeling more open now to talk about these things, which is a good thing that's come out of the television shows.
It certainly would be. Liz, do you have a question?
No, but I see the question popped up from a viewer here.
I have not been to the Uinta Basin, so I have a lot of friends that have been. I know some of those guys, from the Skinwalker Ranch show, and it's a fascinating place. So, like my friend James Keenan, who's been a guest on that show a couple of times, he's like, "When are you coming back out this way? I want to take you to Skinwalker Ranch." I'm like, I know I got to get it in my schedule. So one of these days I'll certainly get out there, but I have not yet been.
What do you think's going on at Skinwalker?
It's another, strange magnetic area. The tests that they've done out there really kind of point to that there's probably, some people try to say, maybe there's a UFO buried under the ground or something. And I think it's probably more of a natural mineral deposit that's under there. And like we were talking about before, when that magnetism from the core of the earth wells up from the ground, it passes through different, minerals and metals and things like that. And it's probably hitting whatever the heck is there in the ground and generating this like vortex activity and these different signatures that are causing, and certainly UFOs would be interested in it. There's a lot of speculation that UFOs pass by because, maybe they're trying to fuel up, maybe they kind of recharge off of those, or maybe they're getting some sort of reading like, this is an interesting area on the planet. We're getting some sort of signal, and they come over and check it out, and they're like, "Oh, it's just a ranch," So, but I think there's something, so it's probably a natural mineral formation that's under the ground that is creating all this strange electromagnetic activity there.
So there probably is one rational explanation in reality for the most part.
Well, but the thing is, okay, rational explanation that okay, natural mineral creating it, but the things that it creates are really bizarre. You get all the strange paranormal activity there. You do get a lot of the UFO sightings. You get the strange cattle mutilations. What's going on with that? So I think it's causing like portals to open and things kind of come and go from other dimensions or even from other planets. If extraterrestrials are. And I do believe that they have the technology that they know how to traverse from one place in the universe to here without having to use a spaceship, because that would take them a long time using Newtonian physics to get here across the cosmos. That they have figured out how to open up stargates and portals and things like that, and so they could be coming into our world through a place like the Uinta Basin.
And it makes sense because they have an advanced helicopter, very new on that show, and it gave some readings that something was beneath it by like only about 40 feet, and they were several thousand feet up in the air.
Yeah.
So it's getting false readings, and I think it was also getting false compass readings. Some of the directions were off in one of the last episodes I saw. I'm behind a little bit, but
I'm a little bit behind too. But that's indicative of something. Some strange electromagnetic anomaly under the ground. But we see that again in the triangle areas like Bermuda, Alaska, and these other places where you get those strange compass readings that are just bizarre.
All right. Well, I think that. Do we have any questions, by the way, in chat? Let me check. I haven't looked so
far.
That looks to be about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that one was out of chat. So yeah.
Yes. That was Brendan, probably the board operator. Thank you, Brendan. All right. And that's about most of what we had left. One second here. Okay. Have you been to Japan, and what do you think of the Devil's Sea?
Yeah, I have not been to Japan, but Devil Sea, that's the Dragon Triangle. Lot of interesting history there, dating back, you can go 1000 BC, and you have different Chinese fables and legends talking about, dragons being under the sea there, because you have a lot of ships that suddenly, disappear or they break apart. People go missing out there. Kublai Khan, grandson of Genghis Khan, twice launched invasions to Japan, and both times his fleets got caught in typhoons through that triangle area, through the Devil Sea, and he lost like 40,000 troops, twice. So he obviously stopped, but during the early 1950s, because there were so many fishing vessels and some official government vessels that had gone missing through that area, Japan decided to launch an investigation. So they sent a ship out to the area that had 9 scientists on board, and you had the crew as well, and never heard from them again. All that was ever found was their wreckage, kind of washed back up. So they, here it is, they're launching an official investigation that goes awry, and so they just deemed that whole area just unsafe. We're warning you, don't go through that area.
All right. Well, I think we're about out of time. I want to thank our guest, Mike Ricksecker, for coming on with us. You can always access his future plans at MikeRicksecker.com. And his courses are available at ConnectedUniversePortal.com. His books are A Walk in the Shadows, A Complete Guide to Shadow People, and Alaska's Mysterious Triangle. Thank you. Plus, his other books are also available on Amazon, are all available on Amazon, actually. His upcoming appearances include June 24th, 25th at Brian Cano's History of the Paranormal in Grafton, Ohio. July 1st to the 9th at the Ireland tour. He still has 2 or 3 spots left. If you're able to make it the last second, it'll be great. August 25th to 27th, he'll be at the Michigan Paracon. September 22nd and 25th, he'll be at Haunt Atlanta Paranormal Conference. October 29th, Warren's Paracon in Connecticut. That should be good. All right. Our next show will be Thursday, June 23rd, when our guest will be Rick McCallum. He's an actor, stuntman, paranormal investigator, and member of the Hollywood GhostHunters. July 7th, our guest will be, I did it once before. Our guest will be Patrick Burns from Haunting Evidence, and he's also an author on the paranormal. July 21st, James Anito. He's a demonologist and member of, I'm going to mispronounce it, but Duo Demonology. August 18th, Shannon Rogers from The Ghost Ruined My Life. She's also owner of Paranormal Explorations of America. September 1st, we will have Kieran O'Keefe. He is a legitimate parapsychologist. He is from the UK show Most Haunted. If you liked our broadcast, please consider helping us out by liking and sharing. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in and watching us on Facebook, or by giving a thumbs up, subscribing to the channel, and sharing on YouTube. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate all of you, and thank you for following us. Liz, do you have anything to add by chance?
No, thank you so much, Mike, for coming onto the show. I could listen to your stories for forever, I think, because you just have some great stuff going on.
Thanks.
So
thank you both for having me
with us.
Okay, thank you for coming on. And if you don't mind, Mike, please hang on for the outro to backstage. Do you have anything to add by chance, Mike, as well?
I think you covered it all. We're good.
All right. We tried to anyway.
Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you for coming on. Brendan, go ahead. Take us out.
Hey, this is Chuck Larson. You're watching the CARC channel on YouTube.
You've been watching Paranormal Files Into the Darkness, a Catskill Appalachian Research Collective production. For more information on this program and others like it, remember to like, share, and subscribe to CARC Universal today. To join the conversation on our Facebook group, become a member of the Catskill Appalachian Research Collective Facebook group. CARC. Relentless.